Improvised Intelligence is sponsored by the amazing people over at Chop Chili. If you've been a long time listener to the podcast, you know that this is my favorite brand of chili here in New Mexico. Pretty much put it on every meal that I can. They've got red chili, green chili. My personal favorite is this blend of the red and the green. I think this stuff is phenomenal. They also have frozen bags of green chili that you can order directly from their website at chopchilico.com. You can also find them in stores around the state of New Mexico at Sprouts, Albertsons, Farmers Country Market, John Brooks, Keller's Farm Store, Lowe's Market. And you can also find them in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Hobbs, Gallup, Tucumcari. And for all my friends in Texas, they are in El Paso. Again, chopchilico.com. Go get yourself some amazing chili. Now back to the podcast. Okie dokie. What's up, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching this. Welcome to a brand new episode of Improvised Intelligence. My name is Noah Vargas. I am your host. Starting a little later than I normally like to because I slept in. So, what are you going to do? Thank you everyone for watching and tuning in live. Appreciate that. I have a great show planned out for you guys today. We're not going to go as long as we did last weekend with the Epstein files. Just a little update on that. We are still waiting on Trump to actually release them. There's some interesting provisions written into that. I forget what they actually called it. It's like the Epstein Transparency Bill or some shit like that. Very interesting provisions in there regarding what they actually have to release and all of the, they can't just redact things. That's really what I want to get at here, is they can't just redact it. They have to like cite why they're doing it, the legal reasons why they're doing it, who's signing off on it. So there's actually a surprising amount of checks and balances on Pam Bondi with that one. So I'm pretty happy to see that. Yeah, if you noticed, I had to change my, my little Michael Myers thing here because, as a lot of you know, I throw my episodes into an AI clipper and it tries to pull things that are viral, but Christ knows how well that works. And it keeps detecting the fucking Michael Myers face as a person. So that's been slightly annoying. How are we feeling about the flannel? I'm trying to feel more festive for the fall and autumn seasons, but I feel like I just look like a Matt Walsh in training, you know? I don't know. All right. Anyway, like I said, great show planned for you guys today. You know, it's interesting because originally I wanted to touch, I don't know how many of you guys are following what was going on this week over in Dearborn, Michigan. I did wanted to touch on that. Well, actually, I wanted to make that the whole show, but then after doing about 45 minutes or so of digging into because it was this dude, I forget his name, but he was like running for senator, and then he started all these protests, and he went to the city council and started calling a bunch of fuckers and a bunch of white race traitors and blah, blah, blah. The long story short is you dig enough into this guy, it turns out that he loves to go across the sea to a certain country, and he loves to go kiss a certain wall, and his sister, now I couldn't confirm this. I couldn't go actually find definitive evidence, but I did find some interesting things that were at least alluding to or alleging that his sister was a part of a certain country's military that, he's part of the IDF. So it was very interesting, very interesting. So I didn't want to dig into that too much, but we'll probably call back to stuff like that, mainly around the Muslim problem, however you want to see that in this country, quote unquote problem, because there are some real issues with it surrounding the immigration, but we'll get to it. Another thing I did want to touch on very quickly, because the reason why it's not the main story today is because I'm waiting just to see what comes out of it this week. We are having some interesting developments surrounding the Ukrainian war. Now, the envoy, I don't believe it was Steve Witkoff this time around. I got to pull it up really quick. But Trump's envoy to Ukraine, they have drafted up a something like 25, 26 point deal. Oh, it is Steve Witkoff. Okay. So, Steve Witkoff and Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev. I really butchered that. Sorry. Let's see. So they are negotiating a ceasefire for parts of eastern Ukraine. It is so basically it would say. Let's see here. I'm talking over my words. I'm sorry. The ceasefire would reportedly grant Russia parts of eastern Ukraine it does not currently control and weaken the Ukrainian armed forces in exchange for a security guarantee by the United States for Ukraine and Europe against future aggression by Russia. The 28-point plan calls for Russia to gain a full de facto control over the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, which includes both Luhansk and Donetsk. I'm really bad at those pronunciations. Which would be recognized by the U.S. and other countries, along with Crimea, lawfully part of the Russian Federation, though this would not currently be required of Ukraine. A Ukrainian official claimed the plan also included limitations on the size of the armed forces of Ukraine and on its arsenal of long-range weapons in return for security guarantees with the United States. It's my belief they have until Wednesday of next week to settle the ceasefire and for Ukraine to agree to it, which is really just Zelensky. I'm just holding off on that just because I want to really wait for more information to come out about it. I don't know, just quick thoughts, I guess, would just be this whole war was fucking pointless. Truly. I mean, if anyone's watching, please feel free to put in the chat or message me on Instagram. I'll put the little call-in thing here. Where is it? There we go. I'll put that up. But truly, this whole thing was unnecessary. I mean, if we remember, we go all the way back to maybe like, was it 6 months into the war? If not 3 months into the war, Boris Johnson, like there was a plan on the table. There was a treaty already laid out on the table that Russia had agreed to and Ukraine was getting ready to sign, but we sent over Boris Johnson to go tell Zelensky, go slap him on the hand a little bit and be like, hey man, you can't do that. We got a war to fight. We can't fight a war in the Middle East anymore. We need to go over and, keep the war machine moving. So this whole thing was fucking unnecessary. And now, because of the bolstering of this conflict in the Biden administration, it's now empowered Zelensky with this unrealistic sense of, I don't even know what to call it, but just, it's like when the little brother, now obviously this analogy could get used to the next country we're going to talk about, but it's like when the little brother is in like second grade and he keeps picking on or trying to fuck with the fifth graders, and he's got an older brother that's in the fifth grade, or he's got an older brother that's in like the sixth or the seventh grade. So like he's there with mom when they come pick up the second grader. So the fifth grader knows not to fuck with the second grader because then the fifth or sixth grader is going to fuck with, you see what I'm saying? We've empowered and we've given so much. And I understand why, at least in the beginning, like I'm not saying what Russia did was a good thing. They should not have invaded. There's no bueno. It's not good. However, we gave this false sense of confidence into Zelensky to think that he could actually win this war. And God, I don't want to spend so much time on this, but I just think it's interesting to point this out, just propaganda in general. If you remember back to the beginning of the war, there was like the ghost of Kiev. That was a bunch of bullshit. Where it was like some Ukrainian fighter that was going down, taking down a bunch of Russian troops, or like how they were the Ukrainian forces were just rolling through the Russians and blah, blah, blah. It seems like the only constantly well-reported statistic about each of the armies is that they're not worth too much, unfortunately. Not saying the men themselves, of course. Those are brave men. And it's very tragic what's happening to those men that are getting forced to go die in those fucking trenches. It's horrible. It's ugly. And anyone who's been saying that this war needs to continue needs to go watch 30 minutes of that footage. And if you don't change your mind after that, you have no soul. But the actual capabilities of those militaries, it appear, not what we were told in the beginning. And I remember those reports were coming out on both sides where like they were having to draft in older and older men into the Ukrainian army. The Russians were straight up, I think the Ukrainians are also doing this too, where they were just grabbing people off the streets, throwing them into their army, into the front lines. There were some reports, I don't know how real this is, but there were some reports that there were individuals, men with severe mental disabilities on the Russian side. They were getting pulled into the war. So who knows? But my point in all this is just saying that this war was not necessary, and I hope it comes to an end soon. Remember, this is the war that's supposed to have stopped in the first 24 hours of his presidency. Well, what's today, the 22nd? Well, we're a little over 11 months or 10 months into the shit. Jesus Christ. January? Yeah, basic math here. Yeah, about just under 10 months, or 11 months rather. So we'll see. So we'll see how that pans out. Hopefully it works out. And yeah, but now there's at a point where they would have been anyway, where it's like Russia's taken enough territory where they wouldn't have given, they're not going to give it back in any real scenario. This all could have been avoided. That's what I'm trying to say. This all could have been avoided. Okay. The first real topic that I want to talk about today. So President Trump decided to go on Truth Social. We all know the bustling social media page that is Truth Social. He decided to go on Truth Social and post a couple of things about some of his fellow congressmen. Now, I'm going to read these truths. It's so fucking corny. I'm going to read these truths for you guys. And just kind of get into these and get some context. So the first one he put out, so basically, so this is all in response to a video that they all put out on social media where basically they were telling members of the military to not obey unlawful orders. Now, for anyone who knows anything about the military or has been in the military, you know that a part of your oath of enlistment that you take when you first join, you're not even in boot camp yet, you haven't been shipped off anywhere, you're still at the MEP station. You take the oath of enlistment, and a part of that is that you swear to obey all lawful orders. And there are provisions inside the UCMJ that say that, hey, you cannot, or you are allowed to disobey unlawful orders. Now, obviously, that is not something that is exercised very much. And when it is, the military tends to keep it pretty quiet because they don't want that bad press coming out. Speaking from personal experience, not that I've ever had to deal with unlawful orders, I don't think. I never had to, but I had some real dickhead commanders that made my life not too great. I would imagine that disobeying unlawful orders is a pain in the ass, to say the least, and you'll probably end up getting some kind of Article 15 because command thinks they're right, and then they're going to get put in front of that. I forget what they call it, but it's basically the command level hearing with your battalion commander, where they're saying, hey, you have an Article 15, this is why, and this could potentially go to a court martial, and blah, 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 blah. But on the flip side of that, that's why the military has JAG officers. That's why the military has inspector generals, to keep those command structures in check so they don't give out unlawful orders. My whole point in saying this is that telling that was such a benign statement, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion, but that was such a benign statement from these congressmen and women to these service members saying, hey, don't obey unlawful orders. You're allowed to disobey unlawful orders. They might as well have told them, hey, make sure you get to PT formation and work on time. Make sure you pass a PT test, wear the right uniform. Keep your weapon clean. These are the basics of being in the military. To me, it was pretty benign. But, of course, Trump, I will say this, because there's a lot of people, especially in my comment sections, there were some people saying that they're basically winking to left-leaning servicemen and women, saying that they're, encouraging them to go against the commander-in-chief, encouraging them to go against the president. And they're basically accusing these congressmen of dog whistling, right? That's basically what they're accusing them of. And I wouldn't go that far personally. Now, I see the argument where it's like, okay, well then why didn't any Republicans do this? Like, why didn't any Republicans participate in this video? And that's an easy question for the same reason that Marjorie Taylor Greene dropped out. They don't want to get ostracized by the party. So even if they feel this way, and I'm sure there's a lot that do feel this way, there's so many reports coming out of the White House this year alone of the amount of people that fucking hate Trump on his side. And even if you guys, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, just real briefly, but if you guys saw the video that was posted yesterday by Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she's stepping down in January, she had put out, there's a ton of people on their side that fucking hate Trump and what he's doing. So of course they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to step out and speak out against the party or speak out against the president because they want to toe the line. They want to keep their career and so on and so forth. If there is anything to really accuse these people of, I would say it's for baiting Trump, and they did a pretty decent job at it because, of course, you don't have to do a lot to provoke the guy. Donald Trump, of course, did take the bait, and let me pull up. I just had the tweets. Let's see here. Okie dokie. Okay. The first tweet that he decided to put out. I'll take this out of here. Okay. The first tweet he decided to put out, this is really bad and dangerous for our country. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. Seditious behavior from traitors. Lock them up? ? President DJT. Seditious behavior is another tweet that he put out. Seditious behavior punishable by death. And then he reposted a truth by some account with the Crusader. I think it's the Crusader cross on it. It's at P78. Hang them, George Washington Wood. Now, okay. Freedom of speech is a thing. I totally understand that. I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, personally. I'm a big believer in freedom of speech. Now, and again, this is going to be kind of the theme of the show. I give as many facts as I can that relate to the situation, but it's kind of just me thinking out loud and kind of just putting these thoughts out there and see who agrees with me, who disagrees with me. Maybe we can just start a discussion around these things. But, okay, so the president is not just a private citizen, just like the rest of Congress and the rest of the government are no longer private citizens. They are public servants, right? Now, specifically with the president, this is kind of where my brain goes. Specifically with the president, he is a part of the military. He is the commander-in-chief. Now, as many of my friends and maybe some of the people watching this podcast know, if you were in the military, you give up rights being in the military, right? You don't give up full rights. Some of your rights are just, let's just say slashed, right? Mainly your freedom of speech, freedom of protest, stuff like that. Right, like you can't go to a protest while you're in the military. You cannot go to a protest in uniform because then you're a representative of the United States military, and they can Article 15 you, court-martial you, that kind of thing. That's why, when you see a lot of protests, specifically from the left, right, you'll see a lot of these guys a lot of veterans in their uniforms that are saying, "I used to be a vet and I hate this," blah blah blah. Right, that's why they do that after the fact. So. By that logic, and I'd imagine that because of that, because I don't want to call these, because it is a politically, those statements allude to political violence, but he's not calling for people to go kill them. He's just saying that their actions could be punishable are punishable by death. Now, could the argument be made by somebody that a diehard Trump supporter could see that and go, "Oh, well, boss wants us to go kill these Congress people. Let's go get them." That could be a thing for sure. Maybe. But he's not directly calling for that, right? I want to be as specific as possible that I can with these things. Because, we saw the last time that Trump's words got taken out of context, the fucking BBC got sued for it. And rightfully so, because that was a fucking joke. But I think at a bare minimum, we have to agree that it is certainly unbecoming of a president to be saying things like this publicly about sitting members of Congress. right? Especially without citing any kind of like legal precedent or citing anything, to be honest with you, citing any laws. It's just, we have to agree that at a bare minimum, that's unbecoming of a president. And that's why I said at the end of my video that I posted this week is this grounds for impeachment? Because I already saw people on the left saying, oh, he needs to be impeached. He's calling for the death of congressmen, blah, blah, blah. Because I just genuinely, I don't know, right? Now, why was this video made? I think that's important too. So the video was made because there were a lot of headlines that came out this past week saying that in December, I believe starting on December 5th, that sounds right. Yeah, December 5th. There were a lot of headlines coming out saying that saying that in December, the Coast Guard would no longer consider images like a swastika or a noose, like a lynching noose. They would no longer consider these things to be racially charged or otherwise hateful imagery. So I would imagine that is what, I'm just going to take a picture to post this on social media because I forgot to promote my own fucking podcast. So I would imagine that's why that video got made. Now, the acting commandant of the Coast Guard came out in a memorandum, and I'll read little bits of that memorandum. Came out in the memorandum saying, hey, fuck that pretty much. We're not going to, because basically what they're doing is they were like, there's like a ranking structure of what these images or hate speech, like how the levels of severity, and they're going to bring it down. And they're going to bring it down, and the acting commandant of the Coast Guard was like, hey, we're not going to do that. That's not cool. And I'll read a little bit of that memorandum because I have it right here. Give me 2 seconds to pull it up. Okay, so this is from Kevin E. Lunde, the acting commandant of the Coast Guard. The subject is Coast Guard policy and lawful order prohibiting divisive or hate symbols and flags, and it cites the references in their policy. So the general part of it says the Coast Guard does not tolerate the display of divisive or hate symbols and flags, including those identified with oppression or hatred. These symbols reflect hateful and prohibited conduct that undermines unit cohesion. Excuse me. A symbol or flag is prohibited as a reflection of hate if its display adversely affects good order and discipline, unit cohesion, command climate, morale, or mission effectiveness. This policy applies to all Coast Guard personnel. And then prohibition, the second part of it. Divisive or hate symbols and flags are prohibited. These symbols and flags include but are not limited to the following: a noose, a swastika, and any symbols or flags co-opted or adopted by hate-based groups as representatives of supremacy, racial or religious intolerance, anti-Semitism, or any other improper bias. The display of divisive or hate symbols is prohibited and shall be removed from all Coast Guard workplaces, facilities, and assets. Display or depiction of the Confederate flag remains prohibited in all Coast Guard workplaces, facilities, and assets. This includes barracks and other quarters where the flag is readily visible and the exterior of Coast Guard housing. This prohibition includes automotive bumper stickers and other vehicle adornments, clothing, and other apparel, and when the flag is displayed inside a vehicle in plain view and readily visible to the public. This prohibition does not apply to state flags or state-issued license plates. It is not applied to displays or depictions where the Confederate battle flag is only an incidental or minor component, such as in works of art or educational or historical displays. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to me. Look, I am all for freedom of speech, truly. Now, this is a conversation that I'd love to have with somebody one-on-one because I genuinely like the Confederate flag specifically is a very interesting one because it's a part of our nation's history. It's a part of the history of the Deep South, right? That we can all agree on that. Now, it is also the main symbol surrounding those that tried to secede from the Union, right? And we're not going to get into a whole thing about the Civil War, but it's like one of those things where people argue like, no, the Civil War is about states' rights. Okay, the state right to do what? You know what I mean? So, but I think, I don't know, like, personal liberties. That's where I said in a couple episodes ago, because I do really believe this, that personal liberties need to take precedent. And it's like, where do the personal liberties where are they getting attacked? Who is getting attacked because of that? Who does that apply to? And then work your way from there. So I'm sure, like, it's a very small group of people, but I'm sure there are people that genuinely feel that they have some sort of heritage-based or familial-based right to display the Confederate flag because, like, my grandfather or my great-great-grandfather or whoever fought in the Confederate Army and I'm in the military now, I love my country, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but you have to accept that they were on the wrong side of history, A. B, they lost. Sorry, they lost. And they were fighting. They were fighting for the right to have slaves. So, yes, it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But again, back to my original point of when you're in the military, you have these rights restricted. While you may feel, it's just like with any other job, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and display my views and have like a giant logo behind me of the company that I work for, right? Like, I'm not going to do that because A, I just think it's common sense not to. But also, I would imagine, frankly, I don't know all my company's views. I think they're pretty capitalistic. I'm sure they're money-based. I'm sure they're business-oriented, and they want to do everything in their power to maintain their business, and it's very successful in the billions. And they want to do everything to maintain that. And I would imagine that I've said things on this podcast that might not align with the CFO or with stockholders. So that's why I don't advertise where I work, right? So then when you go and you join an organization, a business, you really could call it a business, but you go and join an organization like the military, specifically the Coast Guard, even though you believe you have the right to display these things, the military might not agree with you. It turns out they don't. And it turns out the military does not take kindly to not just the Confederate flag, but a swastika. I don't think that last one needs any explanation. Anyone arguing that they have the right to display a swastika, you know what I mean? Like, reevaluate where your life is. That's all I'll say about that. And then I want to say I saved it, but there is a report that came out, I believe, on like yesterday, on Friday, or the day before, that flat out said that the Coast Guard will no longer be moving forward with that with the like the lowering of the fucking hate images. Let me see if I can find it really quick. If I can't find it, it's fine, and we'll just move on. Okay, if it's not on this page, let's see. Nah. Oh well, can't find it. All right. Anyway, so yeah. So I don't know, man. Like, to really wrap this point up, I just don't think that it is becoming of a president, and I don't think it's necessarily something that we should accept. That the president should be publicly calling for the deaths of his colleagues. Now, on to part one of our main topic of today's discussion, which is the broader topic, or I guess the broader idea. I don't even say it's an idea anymore because there's a lot of people that align themselves with this. Christian Zionism in America. We're going to talk about this broadly. It's really going to be a lot of me giving my thoughts and then a real world story that happened today and directly involving a Christian Zionist and a Jewish traitor. Okay. So we're going to start with that story. Then we're going to blank it out to Christian Zionism and my thoughts on that. Okie dokie. So I don't know how many of you guys saw this. There were a couple of reports. I couldn't bring up the report from the New York Times because I don't have a subscription. But the New York Times was reporting on this. NBC did a report on this. Al Jazeera did a report on this. And I got a report from Axios as well. So this past week on Wednesday, I believe. Let's see when the earliest. I believe it was on Wednesday. Maybe it was. When was this first getting reported? Because I have the initial report here on my Instagram too. But I want to say it was as early as Wednesday. Let's see. Yeah. Wednesday. So Mike Huckabee, if you don't know who Mike Huckabee is, he is a long-standing figure in American politics. He currently serves as the American ambassador to Israel. Just a little bit about his background in politics. He's run for president multiple times. He used to be the lieutenant governor of Arkansas. He was the governor of Arkansas, and right now he is the ambassador to Israel. Now, he decided that it would be a great idea. He decided that it would be a great idea to go and meet with Jonathan Pollard, who is a convicted, now released, now paroled, but convicted Israeli spy. So, just a little bit of background on this gentleman, if you want to call him that. So, in 1984 and 1985, Jonathan Pollard, he was in the U.S. Navy as an officer, as an intel analyst, okay? He was giving classified documents to Israel. Now, I read and I've heard multiple accounts where it was as blatant as, this is back in the 80s, right? So it was as blatant and as clear as literally getting a bundle of documents into a briefcase and carrying it to his Israeli handlers. Now, he was paid by his Israeli handlers. I found a really interesting little point here about how he was paid. Cash, jewelry, and gifts. Jewelry, that's... You don't want to be racist, but So he was paid in shekels. So he was paid by Israeli handlers, and initially what this was a high-level espionage, right? This is during the Cold War, and there's a lot of reports that were coming out that in the passing of these documents, either in the... Because I would imagine that not every single time he was giving it to these handlers in person. I'd imagine there's other ways he was doing it too. But a lot of these high-level documents, and we'll get into what these documents were in a little bit, a lot of these documents made their way into Soviet hands. This is during the 80s. This is during the Cold War, right? So what happens is on November 21st, 1985, he is arrested. Pollard and his wife, Ann, they tried to seek asylum in the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., they were turned away and arrested by the FBI outside the embassy. On March 4th, in 1987, he pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit espionage. He got a plea deal that was designed to avoid a trial that would further reveal classified intelligence. And then on that same day, he was sentenced to life in prison. The judge cites a classified memo from the Secretary of Defense, who is Casper Weinberger, outlining damage caused by Pollard's leaks that were described as unprecedentedly severe. Now, let's really take a look at what this is. This was a Jewish spy in our military. Not just in our military, he was a high-ranking naval officer. Now, these things are not unique. These things happen at least a few times a year. Earlier this year, there was a guy in the Army, I believe he was like a specialist. He might have been a sergeant, like an E4, E5 type. He was, now this was a case of what I would consider entrapment. He was caught trying to sell intelligence about our radios and our communication systems to the Russians, but it turns out the Russians he was selling them to were really undercover FBI agents, and they put him away for something like 20 years. Let me look him up really quick. U.S. Army soldier caught selling secrets to Russia. Here we go. So the FBI's this was back in August of this year, August 6th of this year. This is from justice.gov. The FBI's investigation revealed that Taylor Lee allegedly attempted to provide classified military information on U.S. Oh, so it was tanks. My apologies. So U.S. tank vulnerabilities to a person he believed was a Russian intelligence officer in exchange for Russian citizenship. Today's arrest is a message to anyone thinking about betraying the U.S. This is coming from Roman Roshavsky of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. Today's arrest is a message to anyone thinking about betraying the U.S., especially service members who have sworn to protect our homeland. The FBI and our partners will do everything in our power to protect Americans and safeguard classified information. But I want to say that there was an actual undercover FBI. I feel like that they're... Yeah, okay, here we go. This is from K-Fox TV. So a Fort Bliss soldier accused of selling military secrets to Russia, formally indicted on 3 counts of violating the Espionage Act. Yeah, so he was arrested near a bus stop by the El Paso International Airport after an undercover operation. They're undercover agents posing as Russian officials. Maybe I'm thinking of a Navy guy. I could have sworn there was a Navy dude. Or maybe it was to China. Okay, so there was an actual Navy guy who sold it to a Chinese intelligence officer. So this is coming from NBC. A U.S. Navy sailor was convicted Wednesday. This is August 21st, 2025. A U.S. Navy sailor was convicted of Wednesday of espionage after he sold Navy secrets to a Chinese intelligence officer, federal officials said. Jingchao Wei, a 25-year-old who also goes by Patrick Wei. I don't know how the fuck you get Patrick from Jing Chao, was found guilty of 6 crimes, including conspiracy to commit espionage, and unlawful export of, and conspiracy to export technical data related to defense articles in violation of the Arms Export Control Act and the International Traffic in Arms regulations. He was found not guilty of 1 count of naturalization fraud. Okay. Anyway, back to the point. But so this is not a irregular thing that happens, but it does happen, right? But this is these last 2 cases that we were talking about. One of them was to China, a known enemy. One of them was to undercover agents posing as Russian officials, another known enemy of the United States. But this is a U.S. naval officer selling secrets to an ally. Now, obviously, everybody spies on each other. We spy on our allies. I'm sure our allies spy on us, all that kind of stuff. We know these kind of things. But they're doing this in a way, he was doing this in a way to damage America. Our ally was seeking to do this to damage America. Now, this ally also happens to be our biggest welfare baby that we have and that we have had for the better part of 60 years. Like, do you not see how ugly this is, right? How severe this is. A Jewish man selling secrets to the Jewish state of Israel. Now, I'm not saying this from a basis of anti-Semitism or bigotry, because I'm truly not either of those things. I'm not at all. But it's a simple matter of pattern recognition, in my opinion. But you can't really talk about these things in this kind of light, or you get labeled as an anti-Semite. You get labeled as a Nazi, as a whatever. So, he got life in prison, right? Now, initially, from 87 to 93, the Israeli officials denied any connection. His wife got 5 years for her involvement, released 3.5 years after due to poor health. In 95, Israel finally does acknowledge that he was an agent of the Israeli government, assumingly Mossad. And ever since then, presidents over and over were denying parole, denying a pardon. Now, in 2015, after 30 years in prison, he was released on parole. He had a 5-year travel ban, GPS tracking, computer monitoring, and a nighttime curfew. Into the parole restrictions came under the Trump administration in November 20th of 2020. He was allowed to leave the country. He was allowed to leave the U.S., and he arrived in Israel on December 29th, 2020. Now, it is reported, well, first of all, there's some false reporting going on. There's a lot of reports that came out this week, and I think I saw Fuentes even talk about this. Like, I saw a clip of him or something. And I saw no reporting to back this up, but there's a lot of people saying that he was pardoned by President Trump. This is not the case. He was not pardoned. He was only paroled. But what's interesting is that when I was doing my research on this, he was flown to Israel on Miriam Adelson's private jet. Now, you remember Miriam Adelson from last week's episode, because she's also the same Jewish donor that donated heavily to President Trump's campaign this last go-around. She's donating upwards of $20 million to unseat Thomas Massie. Where do her allegiances truly lie? We're going to get into this subject a little bit later. I know I said Christian Zionism, but it's really going to branch out to also the idea of dual loyalty or dual alliances here. Anyway, so December 29th of 2020, he arrives in Israel and he is greeted by Netanyahu, and he is given this like hero's statesman's welcome. The prime minister welcomes on the tarmac. A bunch of people are applauding that he's back. He's welcomed as a hero. This man who betrayed the United States, betrayed the military. He betrayed the country that he swore to protect. And he is publicly welcomed by our welfare baby as a hero. Now let's get into a little bit about what he leaked. So he leaked sensitive signals intelligence data, NSA intercepts and capabilities, technical collection methods, frequencies, monitoring priorities and vulnerabilities, data on Arab and Soviet military assets, Iraqi, Syrian, and Libyan weapons systems. Location of PLO headquarters and safe houses, Soviet arms deliveries to the Middle Eastern states. Which is ironic, because right around the same time, let's look about when this came up. Iran-Contra scandal. This happened, between 81 and 86, which is the Iran-Contra affair, which is ironic because we were selling weapons to the Iranians through Israel around the same time. So it shows you how really dirty the American government really can be. So he also gave out documents concerning the U.S. Global Intelligence Collection Tasking Manual, basically showing what the U.S. collects, how it collects it, where it collects it. Technical data on U.S. radars, satellites, and reconnaissance platforms, intelligence on Middle Eastern allies and adversaries. This is information that Israel wanted, but U.S. policymakers had declined to share, including highly compartmentalized assets and intelligence resources. That's an interesting point to bring up, too, about how this is information that U.S. policymakers were denying Israel. So like I said, I've been doing a lot of trying to do my best about reading about all these subjects so I can at least talk some kind of coherently about these things on the side. But, you know, it is interesting. We used to, like, I'm reading the Israel Lobby by John Mearsheimer. And there is it's during this time period where we used to push back on Israel. And we used, not by a lot, don't get me wrong, not by a lot, but we used to say, hey, if you don't do this, you don't get your funding. And that used to happen. That's obviously gone, but we used to tell Israel no. So those are all the things that he gave away. Now, he ends up going and meeting with Mike Huckabee. We don't have a lot of information about what happened in the actual meeting. Let's start with the article from Al Jazeera. So the White House is unaware that U.S. Ambassador to Israel met with convicted spy. The CIA reportedly alarmed by the meeting, which broke a longstanding policy of not speaking with convicted spies, which is pretty important, I'd say. The White House has said it is unaware that a meeting took place earlier this year between U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and Jonathan Pollard, a former Navy officer who's convicted of spying for Israel and jailed for decades. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said that Trump administration had no advance knowledge of this meeting, and, quote, the president stands by our ambassador Mike Huckabee and all he's doing for the United States and Israel. Of course you would say that, because why the fuck wouldn't you? Mike Huckabee met with Pollard in July at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, the New York Times revealed on Thursday. The meeting was reportedly not on Huckabee's official schedule and took place without knowledge of the U.S. intelligence agencies, the Times reported, quoting two unnamed U.S. officials. So they have no idea about what's going on with their own ambassador to our biggest welfare state. And, it's not good. Pollard said that he believes someone within the CIA stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Israel leaked the information about the meeting to the media in an effort to discredit the ambassador and have him removed from his post. I think the people behind this are anti-Israel elements within the Trump administration, he said. Well, of course the fucking Jewish spy would say that. I mean, the fact he gave a quote in general is absolutely insane. In his interview with I-24 News, Pollard slammed members of the Trump administration, criticizing special envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who have taken leading roles in peace talks to end Israel's war on Gaza. Quote, I despise Witkoff and Kushner. They are willing to meet with terrorists who massacred us on October 7th. I mean, how textbook does it really get? Truly. Why do we care? Why are we reporting a word out of this fucking rat's mouth? And I don't even say rat as a necessarily derogatory term, but a rat in the sense of he literally ratted on the country. I don't understand it. Okay. So that leads us to our, and this is just, again, me thinking out loud, me really just kind of trying to voice thoughts on this, because I've been thinking about this for a little bit, but truly, I don't know how to express this properly. Shout out to everybody watching. If you could like the video, leave a comment, chat if you'd like, because this is really where we're really going to get into the discussion portion of this podcast. Christian Zionism in America. Now, Mike Huckabee himself is a proclaimed Christian Zionist. I just want to pull a couple of names of other people just so I can, like, come on. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I saved a tweet from Mike Pence. Let me pull that one up real quick. That's a good example. Okay, so Ted Cruz, of course, Mike Pence, someone named Jerry Falwell Sr., Pat Robertson. But this actually, I'm glad I found Mike Pence on here because he put out a tweet yesterday. He said, "This morning, I am making the conservatives' case for Israel in Fox News. There is no place in the conservative movement for anti-Semitism. We stand with Israel because we believe in right over wrong, good over evil, and liberty over tyranny. If the world knows nothing else, let the world know this. America stands with Israel." Now, a couple of context things I want to bring up before we get into the bigger discussion about this. To me, my opinion, I guess where I want to start from is as a Christian. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I am the most educated, the most well-read. Like I said on my buddy's podcast, go check it out, Cardo Mad. He has a great podcast called Community Stepdad. We recorded an episode on Wednesday. It came out Thursday. I am very much doing my best to educate myself and learning how to think and how to speak about these things, not in the sense of how to control myself, but how to understand my own thoughts and then deliver them properly to you guys and to myself, of course. Now, to me, as a Christian, the core belief of the Christian faith is that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and to be a Christian, you accept him as your Lord and Savior, and only through him do you then go to heaven when you die, right? That is the basic core belief of the Christian faith. Now, when you look at one of the core tenets of the Jewish faith, of Judaism, it's that they basically accept everything in the New Testament. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they also added some books to the New Testament. But everything after the Old Testament, I apologize. They believe everything in the Old Testament, and they add some things to the Old Testament. But after that is where they drop off. Ari Shaffir, if you guys haven't seen his special, it came out like 3 years ago, I want to say now. It's called Jew. It's a great special. Like, it's fucking hilarious. And one of his lines in it is he talks about how he goes, we agree on the Old Testament, but then you Christians decided to add a superhero to the second part of your book. I just think that's funny. But that's where the Jewish faith takes a stark difference from the Christian faith. A key tenet of the Jewish belief is that Jesus Christ is not only not the Son of God, but that he is a heretical figure that tried to lead an uprising in the region and was killed by the Roman government for it. Obviously ousted by the Jewish religious leaders at the time. I mean, right here, so I looked up, this is coming from bbc.co.uk. There is no official Jewish view of Jesus. That's bullshit. But in one respect, Jews agreed in their attitude towards Jesus. Jews reject the tremendous claim which is made for Jesus by his Christian followers, that Jesus is the Lord Christ, God incarnate, the very Son of God the Father. So, they do not believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, obviously Christians debate upon, the abortion issue, the gay marriage, homosexuality topic. There's debates. Now, there's things that the Bible strictly says about stuff like homosexuality that it alludes to about the problem of abortion. But there are just some things in every religion that if you differ from this belief, you are no longer aligned or a part of that religion. Definitionally, right? You are not a part of that religion anymore. With Christianity, it is the belief that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. It is the belief that because Jesus Christ is the Son of God, you only go to heaven through accepting him as your Lord and Savior and believing in him. It's not through good works. It is not through actions. It is not through anything of your own volition gets you to heaven, because Jesus Christ already died on the cross for you. And through that, your sins are washed away. He took that burden for you. He bore that on the cross, and through that, you get to heaven. Right? That is the core belief of the Jewish faith. And now, when you reject that wholeheartedly, you are not only going against the Christian faith, you are now committing heresy against the Christian faith. Now, I'm not saying that as some sort of like physical attack or something like that, but it is a direct heresy and disrespect towards the faith, categorically, definitionally. I think we can all agree on that. So then when you look at the Jewish religion, while there are many commonalities such as Abraham, Moses, God the Father, in the Old Testament, it is again that core tenet that is brought in the New Testament that separates these religions. Now, something I want to kind of bring up as a juxtaposition, as a interesting thing to look at. There is obviously a lot of negative sentiments in the West, in the United States, and for good reason, against the Muslim faith, right? And a lot of these are spearheaded by Jewish leaders and Jewish lawmakers, representatives, bigger Jewish individuals. Christians do this as well, but for the sake of this conversation, this argument, the Jewish people bring this up as well, and they have good reason for it too. Don't get me wrong. They have good reason for it too. But when you look at how the Muslim faith views Jesus, they hold Jesus in a very high regard. Now, do they believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Or right? No. Their Jesus figure is the Prophet Muhammad, right? They do not believe that Jesus is the Son of God. They do not believe that he has done all the things that I said he did, or what he symbolizes and what he is. But they hold Jesus in a much higher regard. They hold him as a holy prophet, I believe the holiest of the prophets. And they actually take it a step further, and they believe that when God comes back, Jesus is the one that comes back with God. But they still have the core. Now, there's a lot of things that I take issue with the Muslim faith, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but we're sticking on this one topic, right? This one tenet of it. But there's a lot of issues I have with it. But Jesus is the one that returns to earth to defeat the Antichrist with God. That is how high they hold Jesus in their religion. Now, to suppose that with the Jewish faith, the Muslims are much closer to Christianity than the Jews are. But we are taught to believe in the West, to hate the Muslims, because it's the whole hate us for our freedom and all that bullshit of the GWAT and all that stuff and whatever. But you see, there are examples recently of the Jewish disregard for Christianity, even in the Israel-Gaza conflict. They bombed churches left and right, as well as many other structures, major structures in Gaza. But they bombed churches left and right, Christian churches in Gaza, in Palestine. We know about this. And this was purposeful. Like, this was intentional. Even in war, structures like hospitals and churches are held to a higher regard than residential buildings or, of course, military structures for good reason. But Israel doesn't see it that way. Clearly, by their actions, they do not see it that way. They do not hold Christian structures in the same regard as you normally would in a war. So what does that say about them? And again, as I'm criticizing these things, I'm not criticizing Jewish people. I'm calling out factual things in the Jewish faith, and I'm criticizing the Israeli government, because I think it's a very important distinction. You've heard this many times from other much bigger, obviously, political commentators than me. Now, I don't even know if I would consider myself a political commentator, to be honest with you. I'm just a guy trying to get his opinion out there, and I also do stand-up comedy, just throwing that out there. But when these people show you who they are, don't ignore it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, just a little bit about some basic key beliefs, things that I found when looking this up. Key beliefs about Jesus in Islam. He's a prophet, not God. Muslims believe that Jesus was a human prophet, not divine, and the concept of the Trinity is unique to Christianity. The Messiah. He is known as the Messiah in the Quran, and is seen as a messenger who conveyed God's message of peace to humanity. Miraculous birth. Muslims believe in the virgin birth of Jesus, born to Mary through God's power, but view this as a miracle of God's omnipotence rather than evidence of divinity. Where have you ever been taught that? Now, obviously, you can find that for the simple Google search, but who is talking about that publicly, right? Not a lot of people. Perform miracles. The Quran recounts Jesus performing miracles with God's permission, such as healing the sick and speaking from the cradle. Now, again, the key differentiator there is that Jesus is performing miracles with God's permission, not that Jesus is God in the flesh, which again is the direct differential, the direct heretical difference between Christianity and the Islamic faith. The Quran states that Jesus foretold the forecoming of another prophet, Muhammad, again, holding another religious figure above Jesus, right? Another big differential. Ascension, not crucifixion. Muslims believe Jesus was not crucified, but was instead raised to heaven by God. It was made to appear to his enemies as if he were. Again, another direct differential. Return before the day of judgment. Muslims believe Jesus will return to earth to defeat the Antichrist and restore justice. And then you go, there's a website called MuslimUnityCenter.org, and they have a breakdown of how they feel about Jesus and stuff like that. But there is a message in here that says, or a part in here that says, Mary the Blessed. Mary was a righteous woman. Her mother dedicated her to Almighty God's service even before she was born. As a child, she lived a life marked by health and righteousness, which others pointed to in admiration. She was raised by the wise Zechariah, who instilled in her the beautiful sense of an Almighty God. When she became a young woman, Mary sought to purify herself further before the Lord, knowing that the hustle of her life in the towns was distracting. She withdrew from her people to a sanctuary in the east. There she could meditate in seclusion and peace. Okay. And then, okay. So this is when she is told that she's going to carry Jesus. But the angel replied, "Your Lord says it is easy for me." But when she felt the little child within her, she fled her sanctuary out of fear that her family would do or say when they heard the news. Mary, however, was not to face hardship. When in her despair, she cried out to Almighty God for oblivion. A voice soothed her, and she found shade in a cool spring under a date palm in the warmth of late summer. She made her dwelling there and bore the child unlike any other in human history. Shortly thereafter, Mary returned to her community carrying the child who was to be called Messiah, Jesus, and the Son of Mary. Again, not the Son of God, the Son of Mary. When her people saw her with the baby in her arms. They couldn't believe her eyes, let alone accept her words. They refused to believe when she was told of an angel who came and told her she was chosen above all other women to carry this burden. They accused her of infidelity, implied that she had ruined the family name. Mary, being overwhelmed, simply motioned towards the child meekly. So, my point in all of this is just to say that the Muslim faith is closer to Christianity. While they have strictly very different beliefs, they are much closer to Christianity than Jewish beliefs. Now, get into the idea of Zionism, right? What is the definition of Zionism? A movement for the reestablishment and now development of the protection of the Jewish nation that is Israel. Right? It is the idea and it is the belief system that Jewish people deserve the country of Israel, and it is a land that is promised to them, right? That's the idea of Zionism. Now, again, the idea of Christian Zionism, dual loyalty, and just my general thoughts on the matter. I have a real issue with at least the idea of Christian Zionism for everything that I just really laid out there. I don't understand why, as a country, we bend over backwards to fund and protect this nation that has done virtually nothing for us. I really don't understand it. They've lied us into wars. They buy our politicians. They potentially, after all this Epstein stuff comes out, they blackmail our politicians. They celebrate spies and traitors when they come back to their country from ours. They create problems for themselves all over the country. And this is all over that region, rather. And this is the analogy I was using earlier about the little brother that starts all the issues knowing that the big brother will protect them. They start all these problems, and then they then they expect America to back them up, and they expect America to bail them out. I genuinely don't understand it. And you see the implicit, not even just, it's bias, but it's just the corruption in our country and the extreme bias leaning towards this country of Israel in our own government, when the most effective thing that they've been good at recently is denouncing and standing against anti-Semitism. I mean, one of the weirdest examples is RFK. He's on the campaign trail talking about all these things he's going to do for the health of the American people. And then he gets into office and he's talking about how he's going to combat against the disease that is anti-Semitism. Just this week, you have Chuck Schumer putting a resolution into the Senate denouncing Nick Fuentes and anti-Semitism at large in America and in the right wing. Because, yeah, I get it. On its face, we should all denounce anti-Semitism. I totally 110% agree with that. But this is the kind of stuff that's even outlined in that book, The Israel Lobby. When John Mearsheimer was trying to get because the Israel Lobby book initially started out as an article, and they were trying to shop it around. They were getting rejected because they were told that as the authors and then as the publishers, they would get charged, or not charged, but they would get criticized and they would be called anti-Semites for it. And every time you criticize the state of Israel, that's what they hit you with. You're a Nazi, you're an anti-Semite, every time. Now obviously the sentiment towards Israel is changing in a post-October 7th world, and obviously a post-GWAT global war on terror world. But I forget who said it, but it's that very famous quote where it's like, when you want to see who's really in power, look to those you can't criticize. If they keep hitting you with the same thing over and over and over again, they're saying, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're a Hitler, for criticizing the Israeli government, for criticizing Israeli influence on your government. Like, it's absolutely insane. And then you look at the makeup of Israel, where this is a country where they have public health care, they have public education. And these are things that Americans have been pleading for the better part of, fucking 50 years, especially recently since the Obama administration. These are things that our country has been demanding, and yet we suddenly don't have the money for it, but we have billions and billions of dollars for foreign wars. We have billions and billions of dollars for the state of Israel. None of this adds up to me. And then the idea that you can fund this country and then they can turn around and say, fuck you. Like, a very interesting thing that I want to bring up. So this gentleman, and I'm going to pull up his name so I can pronounce it correctly. He is a whistleblower that initially came out against the Obama administration for their torturing of prisoners. This is John Kiriakou. Yeah, John Kiriakou. He recently said this about the Iran conflict that's been going on. And this is just, again, a display of the Israeli, not only influence, but I would just say the Israeli pressure on the United States presidency and on our current president, Donald Trump.
Though I'm told that Donald Trump decided to bomb Iran was that the Israelis said for the first time, if you don't bomb Iran to take out these deep bunkers, we're going to use nuclear weapons. And they had never threatened that before. And so Trump said, bombing Iran might actually save us from the start of World War III if it keeps the Israelis from using nuclear weapons.
So according to your source, the Israelis told the President of the United States that if he did not use the United States military power to bomb the nuclear facilities in Iran, Israel, acting on its own, would use nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Do you see why there's a problem with that statement, John?
Yeah.
Because they've never admitted that they've had them.
That's right.
So you're telling me that they just admitted to the President of the United States that they have nuclear weapons and we still do not have them in the IAEA treaty?
I mean, if Israeli nuclear whistleblowers are to be believed, yeah, they've. The reason, though, Adam, they started working on them in the 50s. They got them around the late 60s or the early 70s. Look at Mordechai Vanunu. Mm-hmm. You know, he wasn't charged for treason for nothing.
That's the guy they hid in Rome with the honeypot?
Yeah.
Yeah, 86.
Adam, they started working on.
So, I mean, what else? Like, I think that's just a perfect example, because in what other way do you see an example of, like, where we fund a country and then they're allowed to tell us no like that? And there's many examples of that across the board. It's insane. And then I was having this conversation earlier this week with a good friend of mine, and she was asking me about that issue they were discussing about the Israelis having nuclear weapons. And up until I saw that clip, I didn't know about that whistleblower. So that's something I have to look into too. But the easiest thing to look up is just go on Google. There's a whole Wikipedia page on it. It's called the Samson option. And it's basically what it is, and if you don't know, the story of Samson in the Bible is the super jack dude that gets imprisoned, and when he's chained up in this room with all the leaders, he pushes the pillars, kills his captors, but also kills himself. And so the Samson option is that if Israel feels like they're about to get destroyed wholesale, that they press the red button and all their armaments, including their nuclear weapons, destroys everything around them, including themselves, and you know, hence the Samson option. So, but nuclear problems aside, I just don't understand. Like, I guess the main crux of the problem here is that Americans, well, the United States of America perpetuates itself as a Christian nation. Now, obviously, that is up for debate. I don't know that we are a Christian nation anymore. Obviously, our Constitution and our laws and Western belief systems are founded in Judeo-Christian values. I understand that. But are we a Christian nation today? I genuinely don't know. And I really wanted, I know we're going over an hour. I wanted to keep this to an hour, so I'm not going to do that thought experiment right now. But I truly believe that question is up in the air at the moment. Now, that's, I guess, where the issue lies, is that if we're going to continue calling ourselves a Christian nation, why then do we break our backs for a country whose belief system is completely heretical to ours? And then why are our proposed enemies more sympathetic to Christians than our allies are? These are just questions. You know what I mean? Like, there's a huge portion of Russia that are Christian, the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, I understand that governments remove themselves from their base a lot, and governments are not great representatives of their people. I understand that. But I'm literally thinking out loud here, and you see that, and I think that you can clearly see the incongruence in why do we continue to fund this nation? Because you hear this a lot from Christian Zionists, where they say that, the Bible calls us to protect Israel. The Bible calls us to defend Israel. If we do not defend Israel, America will fall. Last I checked, America was up and running well before the official creation of the state of Israel. And in fact, we are the ones that helped spearhead that, create it, fund it, and we continue to fund it to this day. I'm not convinced that if we stopped funding Israel, America would fall. I'm not. And honestly, and again, I'm not educated enough to really back up this specific claim that I'm about to make. But from all the evidence that I'm seeing and all the things that have happened, at least in my lifetime, I haven't been around very long. I'm only 28 years old. But I would almost say that a closer step to peace in the Middle East would come from the complete suspension of funds. Just to put it blatantly and put it, in layman's terms, the complete and total suspension of funds and arms to Israel until they can figure out how to play along with their neighbors. Until they give the Palestinians a state. Until they stop lying about the Iranians trying to build nuclear weapons to destroy the world. Because all this is really doing is pushing our enemies closer together, forming new alliances around the world. BRICS is still a problem. It's destroying our country politically. This is why both sides are losing much of their base. That's why so many of the Americans are moving towards the middle. Now, as I said earlier in previous streams, I think political parties are fucking gay. But this is why the Democratic Party lost the election. A big reason is over the Israel issue. This is why the Republican Party is losing so much of their credibility and their voter base is over the Israel issue. But yet they fund this country. And that's why you have so many people that aren't even conspiracy theorists anymore, because they're just getting proven right over and over and over. That is it because of blackmail? Like, what do they have on these people? Truly, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene step down? She broke away clearly from the MAGA movement, from the Republican Party. She was trashed in the news by Donald Trump, both in the news and in social media. So I don't blame her for feeling slighted and moving away. Now, if I had to guess, I would imagine that she's leaving the Republican Party because the state of Georgia is having their gubernatorial elections next year. She's probably going to go for governor. But do they have blackmail on her? So she's just like, fuck it, I'm leaving. Don't hit me with it. Don't kill me. But you see my point, right? This is the thing. This is the issue that is destroying our government. When just 21, 22 years ago, the sitting president, George W. Bush, had some of the highest ratings, approval ratings of any president at the beginning of the Iraq War. How quickly things change, right? Now, obviously, social media and the internet ramped this process up. A lot of people have a lot more access to information. People are waking up to this issue. But it's made so easy when the government keeps hitting these people that are criticizing the state of Israel, that are criticizing the actions of America in conjunction with Israel, and by calling them all anti-Semites. So it's like you have it's like you're tagging them, right? You're color coding it. So it's like, oh, if you're called an anti-Semite, okay, what's this guy saying? He's probably criticizing Israel, and this guy or gal is probably correct. Why? So genuinely, why is this such a hard thing for our politicians to do? Drop the anti-Semitism bullshit. Attack real anti-Semitism when it comes up, sure. But when it's just criticisms of the state of Israel, just call it that. Just come out and say, we don't like you criticizing Israel, so then we can have a real conversation about this. But then, of course, once they do that, they'll be abandoned even quicker than they're being abandoned right now. So what's the American public left to do, right? It's what's happening right now. People are moving closer to the middle. Sure, we're going to have our disagreements about, again, abortion, healthcare, the economy, so on and so forth. But generally speaking, and this has been the social cue, I think, or the social status, I think, for a long time, people generally agree on basic tenets. They want to be able to have a decent place to live, the ability to have a family, raise their family, protect their family, take care of their children, have a job, and now it's stop funding Israel. There's still debates, like I said, about abortion, about the tax systems, about the healthcare systems, about social programs. But there is now growing a consensus around how we treat this country, the size of New Jersey. That's how bad this problem has gotten with us funding and supporting this state of Israel. And it's absolutely it's incredible to me, you know, not incredible in a positive way, but it's just like, that's how bad it's a foreign affairs problem. That's now at the front of because it used to just be no war. We don't like war. And you'd have the warmongers on the, on the opposite side of the spectrum. But now it's just like, stop fucking funding Israel. So we'll see. That's my general problem with it. I don't like the fact that a proposed Christian nation is bending over backwards for a country that has religious views diametrically opposed to those of ours. And I don't understand it. I don't know why it's happening. I think we know why it's happening, but it has to stop, man, because it's tearing our country apart. It's tearing that part of the world apart. But I really care the most about America, of course. This is where I live. In the same way that I expect Iranians to only care about Iran, Iraqis only care about Iraq. But then when you see a devastation and the displacement of a people, I think it's incumbent upon us to care about that. Because if we can invoke the Holocaust so much, we should be able to invoke the Palestinian genocide so much. I don't know. Thank you everyone that did tune into the episode. I appreciate it. I hope you got something good out of this. I feel like I did. This is going to be an ongoing discussion, I feel like, until the end of time, until something gets fucking fixed. Next weekend, I will be doing this again, hopefully about the Ukrainian war. Hopefully get some wrap up on that. New episode will be coming out on Monday. I'm very happy to put that one out. Very excited about that one. And then stand-up shows coming up. Let's see. In a couple of weeks on Saturday the 6th, I'll be at Casadas Comedy Club. I'll be hosting... I think I'm only hosting the late night show. I have to look at my text messages again for the anniversary. That's going to be a lot of fun. So buy tickets for that. That one sold out last year. So check that out. And then I believe on the 13th in Albuquerque here, the 13th, so the week after, I'll be at the Imperial. And then on the 20th, so the Saturday after that, I will be at Brew Lab on the East Heights doing that show. Come see me do stand-up. I need to advertise it more. I know that. I need to update my stuff, get on my email list and all that. I know that. Please support the podcast. It's real simple. Just honestly, all you have to do is just like it and subscribe. Share it with your friends if you feel so inclined. Comment as well. Follow me on Instagram, Noah Vargas 2. Follow the podcast on Instagram, Improvise Intelligence Pod. I'm on Facebook as well, Spotify as well, under Improvise Intelligence Podcast. Thank you everyone for watching, and new episode on Monday, and then we will see you live on Saturday. Have a great weekend. Oh, and happy Thanksgiving.